seduce women. It's just a very interesting and very insightful kind of expression of the human qualities of monogamy and faithfulness and the lack thereof, which we're going to get to in just 1 minute. Anyway, in this feast of Lupercalia, one of the customs was to bring young boys and girls who were otherwise very strictly separated together. And on the evening before the festival, names of young Roman girls were written on a slip of paper and placed into jars, and each young man drew out a girl's name from the jar and was paired with the girl for the duration of Lupercalia. Sometimes the pairing would last for a year until the next year's celebration, and often the couple would fall in love with each other and later marry. And this custom lasted for quite some time until really Christianity took hold, and it was felt not to be Christian. So that really set in motion the Valentine's Day that we know now. And of course, then we have the coming of Valentine of Rome and his interactions with Emperor Claudius, which I mentioned to you before. Now, during war times, Claudius was having a hard time getting soldiers. And part of the reason that men didn't want to join his army was because they did not want to leave their wives and families. So, as a result, Claudius decided to cancel all marriages and engagements in Rome. And Valentine, for other reasons too, but particularly for this one, he secretly married these couples and defied Claudius's order. So that's another story about Valentine. Then, of course, the one where he is healing his jailer's daughter, which I just mentioned. But in today's times, of course, it's associated with courtly love. Now, courtly love really doesn't exist before the 14th century. This is something that was developed as really a literary idea, something fictional, created for the entertainment of nobility. Then it began to become something that people aspired to. It became a game of love that was developed around ideas of, and social practices came out of these ideas. The idea of loving nobly began to become seen as something enriching in one's life. A kind of mid-ground between eroticism and spiritual attainment. One that had the passion of eroticism, but also had the elevation of spirituality and the transcendence of spirituality. And, courtly love was sort of spread throughout the Middle Ages by these poets who went around playing their lutes and singing these poems. And the idea is that you would fall in love from afar or fall in love upon meeting someone. This was something that before this time just wasn't considered to be something that was done. Before this time, love didn't really exist. So if you go back to ancient Greece, the consent of marriage was given by the father of the bride, who didn't have an opinion of her own. Marriage, the idea of marriage was really a transactional sort of thing, and it had to do with, acquisitions of property, or among the nobles or the ruling class, with unions between countries, protections, in the way we have, agreements and protections among nations, like in the United Nations and so forth and so on. In those days, kings would pledge their daughters or their sons to the kings of other countries, to connect the two countries. And so the goal, if you were a father who had a daughter, you would try to find a rich or prestigious family to, marry her into. Now, as I mentioned, in the Middle Ages, this is where the idea of courtly love starts to emerge, and it's in response to the Catholic Church's institution of the sacrament of marriage. Blessings given to the spouses, and supposed to transmute physical love into a more spiritual one. And so the act of marriage itself was supposed to transmute one's feelings into this purity of love. Love was supposed to arise in marriage and from marriage, not the other way around. Marriage wasn't supposed to come from feelings that were felt before the marriage occurred. But then came the courtly love, a period of time. Chivalrous love towards a noble lady is mainly, symbolic. And the true love exists in sort of a chaste form and not linked to marriage, because marriage was just a glorification and sanctification of a physical and ordinary love. Courtly love was supposed to be something that was beyond that. So the deep meaning of the gallantry and romance of love is really what this is all about. And the ideal is to have this sort of unattainability, in a way. The all of the pain and all of the heartache that's supposed to go with it is all supposed to be very romantic. Interesting ideas that maybe aren't so useful today. I don't know. Statistics of divorce these days are sort of the consequence of this omnipresent myth that love is a requirement that needs to be fulfilled at all times. Everyone feels like they are owed love, and it's expected at all times, and if you don't have it, then something's wrong with you. Everyone wants to have that, love that they've seen in movies and read about in books. With the understanding that these things are fictions, they're not real. we grow up with fairy tales about living happily ever after, uh, and yet this seems to always elude us, because the truth of love is within. The truth of love is the truth of who we are. It's a broadness of love that absolutely eclipses the kind of special relationships that many people associate with Valentine's Day. So, because of this mythology that we have, so many of our thoughts about romance and love have to do with this romantic idea, where the couple walks hand in hand across the field towards the sunlight, and so many of us spend our lives looking for such things, wanting to feel this kind of love. The idea that every person we date is potentially the one that we're going to spend the rest of our lives with. But I think what people really enjoy the most is this idea of being in love, that feeling of being in love, rather than the love itself, the passion that brings. The idea of being in love with love, not a particular person, but the whole feeling. Romantic love in some, versions of it, or some ideas of it, is a higher passion. It's a spiritual ecstasy of love and not the body. The idea of being swept off her feet, the longing, the idea of wanting to die for this passion. Passion means suffering, something undergone, the mastery of fate over a free and responsible person. To love more than the object of love, to love passion for its own sake, has been to love to suffer and to court suffering. The idea of romantic love entails all of this: the desire, the longing to escape from the limitations of the body and feel this passion. So in the romantic view of love, you have to have obstacles. I mean, something has to, right? When you go to see one of these romance movies, there's always something preventing the two main characters from getting together, right? Right? Boy meets girl, boy falls in love with girl, and then something happens. They find out something about each other, something pulls them apart, there's some misunderstanding. And if they just got together and that was it, that would be the end. I mean, there would not be any romance. For a romantic passion to persist, the two have to be kept away from each other for a period of time. What they need is not one another's presence, but the absence of the loved one. Once love has vanquished all the obstacles, it's not romantic anymore. It just becomes, the regular part of life.